Usually, when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there is this comforting expectation of precision, right? You break your arm, the x-ray shows a jagged white line, and the doctor points right to it.
Right, it's very binary, broken or not broken.
Exactly. It's clean, it's visible, and it gives us the illusion of total control. But when you step into the world of trauma and chronic stress, that x-ray machine is utterly useless.
Well, completely useless.
We are suddenly navigating this landscape where the symptoms are invisible, the causes are historical, and your body treats a passive-aggressive email from a coworker exactly like a physical predator.
Yeah, the diagnostic waters become incredibly murky because we're dealing with evolutionary biology clashing with modern society. I mean, what we're really talking about is an autonomic nervous system that evolved for the Pleistocene epoch, but it's trying to process the continuous low-grade psychological demands of the 21st century.
Which is exactly why we are pulling apart the massive wellness buzzword, nervous system regulation today. You see it everywhere online. But our mission on this deep dive is to decode the actual biological reality behind it.
And it is so much more than just a buzzword.
It really is. So we're looking at a dense breakdown of the 4 universal survival modes our bodies come pre-installed with. And then we're going to look at how modern therapy, specifically through a case study of a telehealth practice called Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC, is reverse engineering the patient experience.
Right, to make untangling these biological wires actually accessible to you.
Yes. Okay, let's unpack this because the phrase nervous system regulation gets thrown around like it's just about taking deep breaths or, I don't know, lighting a lavender candle.
Yeah, the internet loves a quick fix.
Right. But what is mechanically happening in the body when things go wrong?
Well, to understand the dysfunction, we have to look at the baseline mechanism, which our source material establishes beautifully. Your body is constantly engaging in a process called neuroception.
Neuroception. What does that actually mean?
So, without you consciously thinking about it, your nervous system is scanning your environment for cues of safety and cues of danger, like constantly.
Like a radar.
Exactly like a radar. And when it perceives a threat, it doesn't wait for your logical brain, the prefrontal cortex, to analyze the data. It immediately activates ancient survival modes governed by the amygdala.
It just bypasses the logic entirely.
Completely bypasses it. And the crucial paradigm shift here is realizing that these responses are not glitches. They are highly efficient, protective algorithms your body learned a long time ago.
You know, I used to think of it like an oversensitive car alarm.
Oh, that's a common way to look at it.
Right, but honestly, that doesn't capture the intelligence of it. It's more like a predictive text algorithm on your phone.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Yeah, because if you type the word danger enough times in certain contexts, your phone starts autofilling it into sentences where it doesn't even belong. Your nervous system is doing the exact same thing.
Yes. It learned in your past that a raised voice, or a slammed door, or even just unpredictable silence was a precursor to something terrible.
So now, years later, your partner sighs heavily because they are tired, and your nervous system autofills danger, flooding your bloodstream with adrenaline and cortisol.
That predictive text analogy is spot on because it highlights the pattern-matching nature of the brain. The body isn't reacting to the sigh, right? It is reacting to the historical data associated with the sigh.
Wow.
What's fascinating here is the profound psychological relief that comes with understanding this neurobiology. When you realize your body is desperately trying to protect you based on old data, rather than trying to sabotage your relationships, you can strip the shame away.
Because you realize you aren't broken.
Exactly. You are just running on outdated software.
Knowing that it's outdated software is one thing, but living with the physical toll is another. I mean, the source material outlines how these protective algorithms manifest, starting with the 2 we hear about most, fight and flight.
The loud alarms, so to speak.
Right. We all know the basics of fight or flight, but what the text really highlights is the insidious nature of functional dysregulation. Let's look at fight. It's not just about throwing a punch in an alleyway.
Not at all.
The text notes you get irritable, snappy, and your jaw is constantly clenched.
Yeah, that localized muscular tension, like a clenched jaw, is literal physiological armor. Your autonomic nervous system has determined that a confrontation is imminent.
So it's preparing for battle.
Yes, so it reroutes blood flow away from non-essential systems like digestion and complex reasoning and pushes it right into your extremities and jaw muscles. You are bracing for a physical impact that is never going to come.
Which totally explains the snappiness. Like, if your entire biological system is primed for life-or-death combat and someone leaves a dirty coffee cup on the counter, your prefrontal cortex is completely offline.
You don't have the biological bandwidth to say, hey, it's just a cup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your amygdala views the cup as another variable in a hostile threat landscape.
You are operating with a systemic lack of safety. And the metabolic cost of constantly pumping cortisol into your bloodstream to maintain that high alert state is just staggering.
Has to wear you down.
It leads to chronic inflammation, terrible sleep architecture, and a baseline of deep exhaustion.
Man, that's heavy. Then there's flight mode, which the source describes as an inability to sit still, a racing mind, and staying perpetually busy to outrun a feeling.
Oh, wait.
Wait, hold on.
What's up?
Is being a highly productive workaholic really a trauma response? Because our entire culture applauds that.
Oh, absolutely.
If you are answering emails at midnight and optimizing every second of your day, you are considered a driven, successful person. So how do we differentiate a healthy, motivated work ethic from someone whose nervous system is stuck in flight mode?
That is the ultimate question for modern society, because the external behaviors can look absolutely identical from the outside.
Right. They both just look busy.
Yeah, but the source text provides the critical diagnostic differentiator. It is flight mode when the specific purpose of the activity is to outrun the feeling. It's all about the underlying biological driver.
So it's about avoidance versus actual pursuit.
Precisely.
And
If you are building a business at midnight because you are in a flow state, engaged with your prefrontal cortex, and feeling creatively fulfilled, that is healthy drive.
okay, that makes sense.
But if you are reorganizing your entire garage at midnight because the thought of sitting in silence on the couch forces you to feel a creeping sense of dread or process unresolved anxiety, that is an unregulated flight response.
Wow.
You are using productivity as an escape vehicle.
You are literally fleeing from your own internal state. And the physical reality of a racing mind means your cognitive engine is constantly redlining.
Always revving.
Yeah, you're burning through your central nervous system's resources just to avoid your own thoughts. It really makes you wonder how much of modern hustle culture is just a mass, unregulated flight response heavily disguised as ambition.
It is a sobering lens through which to view our societal metrics of success, isn't it? But that high-energy, hyper-aroused state is fundamentally unsustainable.
You just crash eventually.
The human body only has so much metabolic fuel. Eventually, the resources tap out, and the nervous system is forced into a completely different low-energy defensive posture. Which brings us to the quiet alarms: freeze and fawn.
These are the sneaky ones. They fly under the radar or get written off as personality quirks. The text describes freeze as shutting down, going numb, and I found this specificity brilliant, not being able to decide what to make for dinner.
That dinner example is a masterclass in illustrating dorsal vagal shutdown.
It sounds so trivial to someone who hasn't experienced it.
It does, but it represents a profound physiological event.
It's that moment you open the refrigerator, you see chicken, you see pasta, and it's not a complex puzzle. But you stand there staring, and you literally cannot execute the choice. It feels like your brain is wrapped in thick wool.
Because it essentially is, biologically speaking. When the nervous system calculates that fighting or fleeing won't work, the threat is too overwhelming, or you are simply too exhausted, it initiates a system-wide dampening.
Just pulling the plug.
Yeah. It bypasses the prefrontal cortex, which is responsible for executive functions like deciding between chicken and pasta, and forces a state of immobilization to conserve energy. Profound nervous system overwhelm frequently masquerades as simple daily indecision.
So the numbness isn't a lack of feeling, it is an active protective barrier. You go numb so you don't have to experience the crushing weight of the anxiety.
Exactly.
Which makes total sense. But let's look at the fourth mode, fawn. Here's where it gets really interesting, because this is where I really have to push back on how society defines good behavior.
Let's hear it.
Well, the text describes fawning as over-apologizing, people-pleasing, and abandoning your own needs to keep the peace. But isn't that often just called being a polite, agreeable person?
It is often labeled that way, yes.
We praise people who constantly compromise and make sure everyone else is happy. We call them great team players.
We do, and that reveals a massive blind spot in how we evaluate human interaction. Fawning is arguably the most complex of the survival modes because it is deeply relational.
How so?
This raises an important question. Where is the line between genuine kindness and a fawn response? It comes down to the concept of self-abandonment mentioned in the source material. Think of it like a computer running background malware.
Oh, I like that. Unpack the malware idea.
So on the surface, the computer appears to be functioning perfectly. It's polite, it's opening the programs you want, but beneath the surface, that malware is secretly draining 90% of the CPU's processing power just to manage a perceived threat.
So there's nothing left for the actual computer.
Exactly. There is no battery life left for the user's actual needs. Genuine kindness is an active choice made from a regulated, grounded state. Fawning is a compulsion born of terror.
You aren't being nice because you want to. You are being compliant because your nervous system calculates that managing the other person's emotions is the only way to avoid danger.
Exactly. You over-apologize to preemptively neutralize their potential anger. You swallow your own boundaries because asserting a boundary risks conflict, and your amygdala registers conflict as a threat to your physical survival.
That sounds exhausting.
It is an incredibly sophisticated adaptation, especially for children who grew up in volatile environments where they had to constantly read the room to stay safe. But the cost to the adult self is a complete loss of identity.
So we have these four highly evolved, deeply exhausting programs. The snapping jaw of fight, the frantic redlining avoidance of flight, the executive dysfunction and numbness of freeze, and the malware-like self-abandonment of fawn.
And they all serve a purpose.
Right. The core issue our sources point to isn't that these modes exist, but that in modern life they stay stuck in the on position. So what does this all mean?
Chronic activation is where the damage occurs. The text emphasizes how exhausting it is when your body constantly acts like it's in danger when you are objectively safe.
You can't just talk yourself down, right?
No, you cannot simply use logic to talk your way out of a bottom-up biological response. You can't stand in front of a mirror and say, "Stop being anxious," and expect your vagus nerve to suddenly downregulate.
Right, because the amygdala doesn't speak English. It speaks the language of safety and threat.
Beautifully put.
If you want to untangle those wires, you need structured professional therapy that uses top-down and bottom-up processing to teach the nervous system that the current environment is actually safe. But this reveals a massive paradox in the mental health industry.
The logistics of accessing care.
Yes. If your nervous system is already frayed and the goal is to establish a baseline of safety, traditional therapy models are often inherently counterproductive.
They add so much friction.
Think about it. You have to research providers, sit on wait lists, fight rush hour traffic to commute to a sterile office, and then navigate a maze of out-of-network bills.
A waitlist isn't just an administrative delay, you know. For a dysregulated nervous system, it is a prolonged state of uncertainty that keeps the amygdala firing.
It's actively harmful.
And a surprise medical bill is a direct trigger for a financial fight or flight response.
Which is why the second half of our source material, the detailed overview of coping and healing counseling, or CHC, is so vital. It isn't just a list of services. It reads like a blueprint for evolutionary healthcare.
They've really thought it through.
They have essentially reverse-engineered the patient experience to remove the biological friction that prevents people from getting help.
They are acting as a pressure release valve for the autonomic nervous system before the therapeutic work even begins.
Yes.
Let's look at the architecture of their model. The text highlights that they are a 100% telehealth practice, completely IP compliant, serving all 159 counties in Georgia.
Bypassing the commute entirely. You can literally stay in the environment where your body feels safest, your own couch, with your own blanket, and engage the prefrontal cortex in the work of healing, rather than burning cortisol in traffic.
Exactly.
And reaching all 159 counties means geography is no longer a threat vector for isolation.
But accessibility is only half the equation, right? Clinical efficacy requires subjective safety. The text details their team of over 15 licensed therapists, specifically licensed clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, and licensed marriage and family therapists.
Which is really solid spread of expertise.
It is, and crucially, it emphasizes that they are a diverse, culturally competent team.
Why is cultural competence a biological necessity for regulating the nervous system, not just a nice-to-have feature?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, as we established earlier, safety is highly subjective and deeply tied to pattern recognition. If you carry generational trauma or experience systemic stressors related to your identity, walking into a room, even a virtual one, with a practitioner who doesn't understand your cultural context immediately signals a lack of safety to the brain.
Oh, wow. So you end up activating the fawn response right there in therapy. You
Yes.
spend your session carefully managing the therapist's comfort, over-explaining your existence, or suppressing your actual needs to avoid being misunderstood.
And no untangling can happen while fawning. A culturally competent team ensures that the therapeutic environment instantly registers as a safe baseline, allowing the patient to drop their defensive armor and actually address the specialties CHC focuses on.
Right, which are anxiety, depression, trauma and PTSD, grief, relationships, and chronic stress. They even do individual, couples, family, and teen therapy for ages 13 and up, plus life coaching.
It's incredibly comprehensive.
But the most radical biological intervention in the CHC model is arguably their financial structure. Financial trauma is one of the most pervasive chronic stressors activating the human survival system.
Without a doubt.
The text explicitly outlines their costs. For Medicaid patients, they offer a $0 copay.
Which is huge. Removing the financial barrier entirely allows the patient's prefrontal cortex to remain online.
Because you aren't panicking about the bill.
Right. If you are worried about how to pay for the session you are currently sitting in, your brain is dedicating processing power to threat mitigation, not therapeutic insight.
Exactly. And for major insurances like Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, and Humana, sessions range from just $10 to $40.
That is genuinely accessible.
By combining zero commutes, statewide access, a culturally competent team of highly credentialed experts, and aggressively affordable care, CHC is dismantling every single excuse your amygdala might use to avoid the vulnerability of healing.
They're taking the excuses away.
So if you are listening to this and realizing your body has been stuck in survival mode, the text provides clear access points. You can call them directly at 404-832-0102, visit tenktherapy.com, or email support@tenktherapy.com.
It is a profound example of designing mental health care around the realities of human neurobiology rather than forcing the exhausted human to adapt to the healthcare system.
It really is. So to distill all the source material today into the most vital takeaway, if you are finding yourself constantly snapping over small things, if you are burying yourself in a hurricane of productivity to escape a feeling of dread, if you are staring at your refrigerator, utterly paralyzed by simple decisions, or if you are quietly abandoning your own boundaries just to keep the peace, take a deep breath.
You are not broken.
You are a biological marvel, and your nervous system is simply doing exactly what it was trained to do to keep you alive in the past. But that software can be updated, and models like CHC exist to safely guide you through that exact process.
The untangling is entirely possible because of neuroplasticity. The brain's ability to rewire itself never shuts off.
Which is such a hopeful note to end on.
It is. Which leaves us with a fascinating forward-looking question to consider. Our sources show us that our nervous systems absorb data from past environments to build these intense protective survival modes.
Right.
But if the system is constantly recording and learning, what new positive baseline is your nervous system quietly learning from the safe, calm environments you are intentionally building for yourself right now?